I wasn't expecting anything new when I walked into the office that Monday morning. Same coffee smell, same familiar buzz of keyboards clicking and printers humming. I'd worked at Carson and Lowe for nearly 8 years, long enough to know which coworkers were allergic to small talk and which ones lived for it, which elevator was always late, and which days the espresso machine decided to rebel. At 36, I had my life figured out. Or so I thought. I had the corner office, a title that sounded impressive at dinner parties, and a calendar so tightly packed it could barely fit in a breath, let alone something as inconvenient as romance. Love? That ship had sailed long ago, or so I told myself. I wasn't bitter. I was practical. I dated. I tried. But no one ever felt enough. No one ever made me forget to check my watch. And then she walked in. The first time I saw her, I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows reviewing a contract with my assistant mumbling next to me about some scheduling conflict. I wasn't listening. Not anymore. Because across the office, the elevator doors opened with their usual ding, and out stepped someone who didn't belong. At least, that was my first thought. She was younger, maybe late 20s, with a kind of presence that felt both quiet and electric. Like static right before a storm. Dark curls framed her face in soft, careless waves, and her suit wasn't quite regulation, tailored too closely, sleeves rolled just enough to break the rules without getting caught. Her eyes, though, God, they scanned the room like she already owned it. And when they landed on me, it was like being read. Not looked at, read. That's the new associate director, my assistant said, like it was just another Tuesday. Jenna Rivera. Transferred from the San Diego office. Supposed to be brilliant. Jenna. The name hit somewhere low in my stomach. I turned away, forcing my attention back to the contract in my hands. I was being ridiculous. She was new. She'd probably say hello, maybe schedule a meeting or two, and then we'd fall into the usual rhythm of coworkers nodding politely in the hallways. But that's not what happened. Because she didn't just knock on my office door that afternoon. She strolled in like she'd been there 100 times, confident and calm, and leaned against the frame with a smirk that could have melted glaciers. Hi. I'm Jenna. Thought I'd come introduce myself before HR makes me sit through another 2-hour onboarding video. Her voice was smooth, warm. Too easy to like. I gestured to the chair across from me. Lauren Matthews. Creative Director. Welcome to the chaos. She smiled, stepped inside, and sat down. And just like that, my office felt different. Smaller. Warmer. Her presence was magnetic, but not in the loud, attention-grabbing way I was used to. She didn't try to charm me. She didn't need to. Her calm confidence did all the work. We talked for 15 minutes. That was all. She asked questions about the firm, the clients, the kind of work we prioritized. I answered like I always did. With poise, with clarity. But inside, I was off balance. I kept watching the way her lips curved slightly when she was thinking, how her fingers tapped softly against her notebook when she listened. She left with a handshake and a promise to catch up soon. I stared at the door long after it closed. That night, I stayed late at the office. Not unusual. But I found myself wandering past her workspace before I left, pretending to double-check something with IT. Her desk was already neatly arranged, a few personal items set up, a photo of a dog, a small succulent, a coffee mug that read, "Don't talk to me until I've had 3." I smiled. I told myself it meant nothing, that I was just curious, that I was being professional. But 2 days later, when she walked into the strategy meeting wearing a deep green blouse that made her eyes impossible to ignore, I realized I was lying to myself. And things got worse when she challenged my idea in front of the whole team. Not rudely, not aggressively, just brilliantly. She saw a gap in the pitch I'd spent a week refining, and instead of dancing around it like most would, she stepped right in, offered a better angle, and backed it up with insight I hadn't even considered. I should have been annoyed. I should have felt threatened. But instead, I felt something twist inside me. Interest. Admiration. Heat. After the meeting, she caught up to me in the hallway. "I hope I didn't overstep," she said, her tone careful but unapologetic. I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I let the spark show in my voice. If you keep being that smart, you're going to make me obsolete.
She grinned.
Doubtful. But maybe I'll make you a little better. I didn't answer. I just walked away with my pulse hammering in my ears. Over the next week, we kept finding reasons to talk. Project briefs, team restructuring, client follow-ups. But each conversation veered just slightly off topic. A comment about a song playing in the background. A shared joke about our boss's obsession with branded pens. Glances that lingered just a second too long. And then came Thursday. Late night. Empty office. I was finishing up a client presentation when I heard footsteps. Jenna. Of course. She held up 2 takeout boxes. Thought you might not have eaten. I hesitated. She walked in anyway, placed one on my desk, and sat. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then she asked, out of nowhere, "Did you always know this was what you wanted to do?" The question caught me off guard. No one asked me that anymore. No, I admitted. But once I started, I couldn't stop. You? I always knew I wanted more than people expected me to want, she said, meeting my eyes. Still figuring out what that means. Our gazes locked, and the air shifted. Heavier. Charged. I opened my mouth to say something. Anything, but the words tangled. She stood up first, collected the boxes. I should let you get back to it. And then, as she reached the door, she looked back. Good night, Lauren. It was just a look, just a smile, but I felt it all the way to my ribs. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her voice echoing in my mind. Something was happening, something I hadn't planned for, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop it, or if I even could. I spent the entire weekend trying not to think about her. I failed. I went to brunch with friends, tried to let them distract me with gossip and bottomless mimosas, but every time I laughed, my mind flicked back to the way Jenna had smiled when she left my office Thursday night. I told myself I was overanalyzing it, that she was just friendly, that I was projecting. But there was a heat behind her eyes I couldn't unsee. And there was something in me, something buried for so long, that had started to stir again. Monday morning hit with the weight of deadlines, meetings, and unread emails. I welcomed the chaos. It helped keep her out of my head until she walked past my office in a navy blue suit that made time hiccup. She didn't stop, just met my eyes through the glass wall and gave me the faintest, knowing smile. Like she remembered. Like she wanted me to remember too. I did. I remembered everything. That night. Her voice. That silence between us. Heavy with almost. Mid-morning, I found myself in the break room, hand wrapped around a coffee mug I wasn't drinking from, when her voice came from behind me. You always stare at coffee like it owes you something? I turned, pulse already betraying me. She was closer than I expected. Close enough to smell the citrusy hint of her perfume. It does owe me something, I said. Productivity. Sanity. She grinned. Then maybe it's time to switch to something stronger. Like what? Tequila shots in the conference room? She tilted her head. Tempting. But I was thinking tea. Something calming. You look tense. Her voice softened on the last word, and it landed lower than it should have. I looked away, pretending to refill the mug, even though it was already full. I'm fine. You sure? She asked, voice lighter now. Because you're stirring that coffee like it insulted your mother. I laughed to spite myself. I wasn't used to this, someone disarming me so effortlessly. Jenna didn't just flirt. She peeled layers. And the worst part? She wasn't even trying. At least, not obviously. That afternoon, we ended up in the same brainstorming session. It wasn't planned. She wasn't even supposed to be on that project, but she'd been looped in last minute to offer insight from her work in San Diego. I told myself to stay focused, to keep it professional. But every time she spoke, I found myself watching her mouth instead of listening to her words. Every time her eyes flicked to mine across the table, I felt that same tug in my chest. We bounced ideas off each other, challenged each other, pushed concepts further than the rest of the room could follow. And by the end of it, our director leaned back, impressed. Whatever tension you two have, he said, bottle it. It's turning into magic.
The room laughed.
Jenna looked at me, smile dancing at the edge of her lips.
Not tension, she said.
Just chemistry. My breath caught. No one else seemed to notice the way she said it. But I did. That night, she texted me. I hadn't given her my number. She must have pulled it from the internal directory. Thanks for the ideas today. You make me sharper. I stared at the message for longer than I should have, rewriting drafts of a reply in my head. Finally, I settled on, "You're already sharp. I'm just keeping up." She replied instantly. I don't think you realize how rare that is. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not without saying something I wasn't ready to admit. The next day, she brought me coffee. Black. No cream. No sugar. Exactly how I took it. I raised an eyebrow. How did you? You ordered it once last week during a team call, she said casually. I noticed things. I wanted to say something clever. Something to deflect. But all I could do was stare as she placed the cup on my desk and walked away. That week became a pattern. Glances. Words layered with double meanings. Shared coffees. Inside jokes. A meeting where our knees accidentally brushed under the table and neither of us moved away. The energy between us was a live wire. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you. And I kept pretending I wasn't holding it with bare hands. I told myself she was too young, that this could never work, that the power dynamic was too complicated. But every time she leaned a little too close, every time her fingers brushed mine when we passed each other folders or notes, my resolve cracked a little more. Then came Friday. I stayed late again. No surprise. I liked the quiet of the office after hours. The stillness. But I wasn't alone. I heard footsteps around 9. I didn't have to look up. I already knew. You need a hobby, Jenna said, leaning against the doorway. Besides micromanaging slide decks. Says the woman who's here just as late, I countered. Touché, she said, walking in. She didn't ask this time. Just sat across from me, like it was her place too. And maybe it was. Want to take a walk? She asked after a beat. It's too nice outside to be trapped in here. I hesitated. Just long enough to feel it. The temptation. The pull. Then I shut my laptop. Let's go. The city was cooler than expected, breeze brushing against bare skin as we walked side by side through quiet streets. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. There was a rhythm between us, a silent understanding I couldn't explain. Finally, we stopped at a small park a few blocks away. Empty. Dimly lit. Jenna sat on a bench. I followed. You always like things this quiet? She asked. Sometimes. Silence is underrated. Not with the right person, she said, looking at me. And that was when I felt it. The shift. The line blurring. She reached out slowly, fingers brushing mine on the bench. Not by accident. Not this time. My breath caught. I didn't move away. Lauren, she said, my name's soft like a secret. If I'm reading this wrong, tell me now. I looked at her. At the way the light hit her eyes. Warm and steady. At the way her hand lingered near mine, waiting. I should have stopped it. Said something safe. Something smart. But I didn't. I turned my hand and laced my fingers with hers. Just that. And it was everything. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Okay, she whispered. And we just sat there. Hands intertwined. Hearts racing. The air around us thick with everything we weren't saying. For the first time in years, I didn't care about the rules. I didn't care about the risk. I just wanted more. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, fully clothed, lights off, fingers still tingling from where they had touched hers. My body was still in that park, sitting beside her on that cold bench, hand in hand like it meant something. And it did. It meant everything. It was the kind of touch that rewrote the language of skin. I could still feel the moment she exhaled, the almost invisible tremor in her fingers when I didn't pull away. I kept replaying it, as if doing so would make it less terrifying. It didn't. Monday came with a heaviness in my chest, like I'd crossed into a territory I wasn't ready for. Or maybe I'd been ready for it longer than I realized and had just spent years pretending otherwise. I walked into the office early, hoping to settle into routine, to bury myself in deadlines and deliverables. But the second I saw her across the hallway, everything unraveled again. She was talking to someone from HR, nodding politely, but when she saw me, her face changed, barely, but enough. A soft curve of her lips, a flicker in her gaze. Recognition. Memory. Electricity. I looked away first. I didn't know what to say. What to do. Nothing had been said aloud between us.
Just the hand.
Just the silence. Just everything. She didn't come by my office that morning. I told myself it was better that way. That distance would help. But by lunch, I felt like I was unraveling from the inside. I couldn't focus. I couldn't read a single email without seeing her name hidden in the text. I gave up and stepped out, walking 3 blocks down to a quiet cafe. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, heart racing for no reason I could justify. And then my phone buzzed. "You okay?" 3 words. From her. I stared at them like they had teeth. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't know how. 10 minutes later, another buzz. "I don't regret anything. Just thought you should know." My fingers tightened around the cup. I should have been the one to say that. I was the older one. The one in control. The one who had everything to lose. But she was the one braver than me. I finally typed, "Meet me in the West conference room at 5. Last one on the hall." She replied with a single word. "Okay." The rest of the day moved in slow motion. Meetings blurred. Names faded. My mind was already there at 5 o'clock, standing inside a glass-walled room with city lights bleeding in through the windows. I was there before her, of course. I always was. Control was my crutch. My illusion of safety. She walked in at 5:03, hair slightly windblown from the weather, coat draped over one arm. She shut the door behind her, but didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence wrapped around us like something alive. She walked toward me slowly, setting her coat on the table, watching me with eyes that knew too much. "You wanted to talk," she said. I nodded. I took a breath, but it didn't come easy. What's happening between us. I didn't plan for it. "Neither did I," she said, her voice low. "But I don't want to pretend it's not real." "It's complicated," I whispered. She stepped closer. "So, let's be complicated. Together." I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steel myself, but when I opened them, she was there, right in front of me. Close enough that I could smell her skin, something faint and warm, like vanilla and rain. "Lauren," she said softly, "I'm not asking you to promise anything. I'm just asking you not to run." Her hand reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my face. It was such a simple thing. Gentle, careful, but it broke something open in me. I grabbed her wrist softly, not to stop her, just to feel it, to ground myself. "I've spent years building this wall," I said. "I don't even know how to take it down." "Then let me help you," she whispered. And then, without waiting, she leaned in and kissed me. It was slow, intentional. Her lips touched mine like a question, and when I answered, when I kissed her back, it turned into something deeper. Her hands slid to my waist, mine tangled in her hair, and for a moment, I forgot the world outside that room even existed. There was only her, the taste of her, the way she melted into me with such need it made my knees go weak. I pulled away first, barely. My forehead pressed against hers. We were both breathing hard. "We shouldn't," I began. She smiled against my mouth. "You already did. This could cost us," I said, eyes still closed. "Then let's be careful. Quiet. I don't care what the world thinks. I only care what you feel when I touch you like this." Her hand slid along my jaw, fingers soft but insistent. My body answered before my mouth could. I kissed her again, this time with all the hunger I'd been trying to suppress. The kind of kiss that left no room for doubt. When we finally parted, I could barely look at her. Not because I regretted it, but because I wanted more. "We need rules," I said breathlessly. She laughed. "You mean boundaries?" "Something like that." "Fine," she said, brushing her thumb along my bottom lip. "Rule number 1, no falling in love." I raised an eyebrow. "Too dangerous?" "Too predictable," she teased. I stepped back, slowly straightening my blouse, forcing my heart to calm. "You should go, before someone sees. And if I don't want to, then I'll be the responsible one. For both of us? For now." She nodded, picking up her coat. Before leaving, she paused in the doorway. "Just so you know, I'm terrible at following rules." Then she was gone, and I was left standing in the silence, heart racing, mouth still tingling from her kiss, and fully aware that my life had just changed. I didn't sleep that night either, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt undone, awakened, and terrified of how much more I wanted. The following week was a carefully orchestrated performance. Every glance had to be timed. Every smile had to be casual. Every interaction in the office had to be scrubbed clean of the truth we now carried between us like contraband. And still, I couldn't stop watching her. I found myself anticipating her footsteps in the hallway, the sound of her voice in meetings, the scent of her perfume when she passed too close. It was torture of the most exquisite kind. We kept our distance in public. Or at least, we tried. But behind closed doors, in quiet corners and empty conference rooms, we were fire and desperation. Our stolen moments were never long enough. A kiss in the elevator just before the doors opened. Her hand brushing against mine under the table during a late-night meeting. My breath hitching every time she said my name like it meant more. Because it did. One night, I found her waiting in the back stairwell, the one no one used after 7 p.m. The second I saw her, the facade I'd worn all day cracked wide open. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. She pulled me against her with the kind of urgency that made the walls feel too tight. Her mouth was on mine, her hands in my hair, my blouse, my skin. The cold concrete stairs against my back contrasted sharply with the heat between us. We didn't say a word the whole time. Just breath, touches, the sound of zippers and sighs and whispered moans barely contained. When we parted, flushed and breathless, I saw something in her eyes that scared me more than any risk we were taking. Want. Real, deep, soul-shaking want. And it mirrored mine. After that night, everything became more dangerous. She started leaving notes on my desk, short and coded. "Nice work in the meeting today. Also, you smell like heaven." Or, "If I brush against you again during strategy review, it's entirely your fault." I kept every one. I told myself it was reckless, that I was older, more experienced, and should know better. But knowing better didn't stop my hands from trembling when she walked into a room. It didn't stop the flutter in my chest when our eyes met across the floor. It didn't stop the dreams. God, the dreams. One afternoon, we were in a client pitch together, our biggest account yet. I was supposed to be sharp, focused, in control. And I was, until Jenna leaned slightly forward to adjust the screen, and her hand brushed my thigh under the table. The contact was light, barely there, but intentional. I nearly forgot my next sentence.
She didn't look at me, didn't react,
just sat back, calm and composed, while my pulse went into overdrive. Later, she found me in the hallway. "You were brilliant in there," she said, her voice low, and very composed considering. "You're playing with fire," I whispered. She smiled. "I plan to burn." That night, we ended up in her apartment. It wasn't planned. I told myself I was just dropping off some reports she needed for the morning. She opened the door in sweatpants and a tank top, barefoot, hair loose. My willpower lasted maybe 30 seconds. She took the reports from my hands and dropped them on the table without looking. Then she reached for me, and I let her. I let her pull me in, let her lips find mine, let her body press against mine until we weren't separate anymore. It was slower this time, more deliberate. She touched me like she was learning me, mapping my reactions, memorizing my sounds. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. Every kiss was a conversation. Every sigh was a sentence. And when I finally fell asleep tangled in her sheets, her arm around my waist, her breath warm against the back of my neck, I realized I'd crossed another line entirely. This wasn't just desire anymore. It was something deeper. Something terrifying. The next morning, I woke up before her. I lay there for a long time, watching her sleep. Her face was softer in rest. Younger. More vulnerable. I reached out and brushed a curl from her forehead, careful not to wake her. And in that moment, the thought hit me so clearly, it nearly took my breath. I didn't want to be careful anymore. I didn't want to keep pretending this was something temporary, something manageable. But I also knew I couldn't say that. Not yet. At work, the pressure started to build. People were noticing. Nothing overt. But there were glances. Comments. My assistant asking, "You and Jenna seem to be working closely these days," with just enough edge to make me freeze. I played it off. I always could. But the awareness was growing. One afternoon, after a team lunch, I found Jenna in the copy room, her expression tight. "What's wrong?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, "Carol from PR just asked if we were seeing each other." My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "That we weren't. That we're just aligned." "And did she believe you?" Jenna looked at me. "Do you?" That silenced me. Because I didn't even know what we were. Lovers? Co-conspirators? A risk I wasn't ready to name? She stepped closer. "Lauren, I don't need labels. But I need to know you're in this with me. That I'm not the only one losing sleep over you." I reached for her hand, just for a second, hidden between us. "You're not. God, Jenna, you're not." That night, I canceled a dinner meeting. I needed air. I needed distance. I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city move below me, trying to remember what my life was like before she entered it. It felt impossible. She was in everything now. In my routines, in my senses, in my blood. I got a text from her around 10. "Can I come over? I don't want to be alone tonight." My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, yes. 15 minutes later, she was at my door. And when I opened it, she didn't speak. She just stepped in, wrapped her arms around me, and held me like she didn't want to let go. And I let her. Because for all the fear, for all the risks, there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I didn't want to let go either. She didn't say much that night. Neither did I. We lay curled together on my couch, the lights dim, the city glowing quietly beyond the glass. Her head rested on my chest, her fingers tracing slow, absent-minded shapes over the fabric of my shirt. I ran my hand gently down her back, trying to match the rhythm of her breathing. I knew she'd had a long day. I knew the questions at work, the pressure, the watchful glances were starting to wear on her. And I hated that. I hated that loving her, even silently, meant hiding her. She shifted slightly, looking up at me. "Do you ever think about what would happen if people found out?" I hesitated. All the time. And it would get messy. HR, gossip, maybe even consequences. For both of us. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Would it be worth it? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know how to tell her that she already was. That every day without her felt dimmer, smaller. That the idea of walking into that office and pretending again made my chest tighten in ways that scared me. Instead, I leaned down and kissed her forehead, gently. "Sleep," I whispered. "We'll deal with it tomorrow." But sleep didn't come easily. Not for either of us. The next morning, we acted like nothing had changed. Like we hadn't spent the night tangled together, whispering truths we didn't know how to say aloud. But it was getting harder to pretend. I could feel the shift in the air when she walked past me in the hallway. I could sense her hesitation every time someone else approached while we were mid-conversation. And I could see the longing in her eyes when she thought no one else was looking. That week, we avoided being alone too long. We kept our conversations brief, professional, but behind every word was a current pulling us back to each other. Thursday evening, I stayed late to finish up a presentation. The office was nearly empty. I was deep in slides and timelines when I heard the soft knock. She stepped inside, carefully closing the door behind her. "You're avoiding me," she said quietly. I set my laptop aside. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me."
From this.
"From what it might cost us." She walked closer, her expression unreadable. "You're not protecting me. You're hiding from what you feel." I stood slowly, my chest tight. "You think I don't feel it? Then show me." She moved closer, and for a moment I forgot we were at work. Forgot about the glass walls, the risks, the rules. I reached for her, my fingers threading into her hair, and kissed her so hard it nearly broke something open. We pulled away breathless, and I whispered, "I think about you all the time. I wake up, and I want you. I sit in meetings, and I crave your voice. I go home, and my bed feels too big without you in it. Jenna, this isn't just attraction anymore." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she looked scared. "Then why does it still feel like we're pretending this doesn't matter?" "Because I don't know how to stop being afraid," I said. "I've built a life on control, on caution, and you make me want to tear it all down." She reached up, her hand cupping my jaw. "Then tear it down. I'll help you pick up the pieces." I pressed my forehead against hers. "I don't want to lose you." "Then stop pushing me away." That night, we left the building separately, as always. But we ended up at the same place, my apartment. She was quiet at first, walking through the door with that guarded look she wore when her heart was full and her mouth didn't know how to keep up. I took her hand, gently, and pulled her close. "Come here." We didn't speak for a while. We just kissed. Slowly, thoroughly. I lifted her shirt over her head and pressed her back into the pillows, memorizing every curve, every sound, every breath. She was soft beneath me but strong. She held me like she was afraid I'd disappear, and I touched her like I was trying to make a promise without words. Later, we lay in bed, legs tangled, fingers brushing between the sheets. She traced the lines of my collarbone with her fingertips. "I hate hiding," she said. "I know. I want to be able to touch you at work. Look at you. Sit next to you in meetings without pretending you're not everything I want." I exhaled slowly. "We'll find a way. Just a little longer." "I don't want a little longer," she whispered. "I want forever." My heart stuttered. The words hit deep, echoing in the quiet space between us. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't trust my voice not to break. But I knew then. Knew it with a certainty that scared me. I loved her, and it wasn't going away. The next day, everything changed. A coworker, Marissa from the data team, pulled me aside. Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. "I'm not trying to stir anything, but people are starting to talk. You and Jenna? It's becoming noticeable." I kept my face neutral. "We work closely. That's all." She shrugged. "Just be careful. Office politics can get ugly." My stomach twisted all afternoon. When I finally told Jenna, she didn't look surprised. "So what now?" she asked. "Do we hide harder? Or do we stop?" "Neither," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "We find a way through this. Together." She smiled, just barely, but I could see the flicker of hope in her eyes. And that night, for the first time, we didn't just make love. We talked. For hours. About everything. Our fears. Our pasts. The future we both wanted but were too afraid to imagine. And somewhere between midnight and sunrise, she fell asleep in my arms again. And I knew. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a distraction. This was the woman I had waited my whole life to find. I just had to be brave enough to stop hiding her. I used to think I was good at compartmentalizing, that I could keep things separate. Work in one box, personal life in another. Love, that box had been locked up and shoved onto a shelf years ago, gathering dust beside old hopes and even older scars. But Jenna made a mess of all my neat little compartments.
She didn't just pick the lock.
She broke in, knocked everything over, and filled the space with a warmth I didn't know I'd been craving. Now, Every part of my day was tangled with her. I saw her in everything. My morning coffee, the playlist I used to focus, the scent of my own clothes after she'd buried her face against my shoulder the night before. I couldn't breathe without feeling her somewhere in the air. And the more I loved her, the harder it became to pretend. We tried. God, we tried. At work, we followed every unspoken rule. No touching. No lingering. Just casual conversations and practiced professionalism. But the tension was there. Always. In the way I'd glance up when she laughed from across the room. In the way her eyes softened every time they landed on me. In the invisible string that tied us together, tighter with every secret moment we shared. And then came the annual company retreat, a 2-day off-site event at a sleek resort on the coast. Meetings by day, cocktails by night. Team building, presentations, forced fun. I'd nearly forgotten about it until the email reminder landed in my inbox. I read it once. Then again. My stomach twisted. I knew what it would mean. Jenna and I in the same hotel. The same long dinners. The same unavoidable closeness. I wasn't sure if it terrified me or thrilled me more. She stopped by my office just before lunch, leaning in slightly, voice low. So, the retreat. Yeah. You going? I nodded. You. Of course. Can't miss the endless corporate icebreakers. Her smirk made my chest tighten. Are you worried? She asked softly. I looked at her, really looked.
Yes.
Because I know what'll happen if we end up alone. She tilted her head. And what's that? I'll forget to be careful. That night, we agreed on boundaries. Separate rooms. No slipping away. No disappearing together. Just professionalism. Just survival. But the second I saw her in the hotel lobby, jeans, black boots, that soft leather jacket I secretly loved, I knew we were already doomed. The day passed in a blur of presentations and small talk. I gave a keynote on creative strategy. Jenna ran a breakout session on client innovation. We didn't make eye contact once. But every time I sensed her nearby, my body responded like a compass finding north. By the time the evening mixer began, I was already unraveling. The bar was crowded. Laughter, clinking glasses, conversations layered over music. I stood near the balcony, nursing a glass of wine, pretending to listen to a junior exec explain his new campaign idea. And then I felt it. Her presence. I turned slightly. She was across the room, standing with a group from finance, laughing at something. But her eyes were locked on me. My breath caught. She raised her glass slightly, a private toast. I didn't smile. I couldn't. Because if I did, I'd go to her. I'd touch her. I'd ruin us. I left early. Claimed a headache. My heart pounded the entire walk back to my room. I locked the door behind me, turned off the lights, and sat in the silence, trying to breathe. 5 minutes later, there was a knock. I froze. Another knock.
Soft.
Familiar. I opened the door. She stood there, eyes wide, hands clenched at her sides. I know what we said, she whispered. But I can't. I can't pretend I don't need you tonight. I didn't respond. I stepped aside. She walked in. And when the door closed, we weren't coworkers anymore. We were just us. Her mouth was on mine, before I could think. Her hands at my waist, my fingers in her hair. Clothes fell like memories. Mouths remembered everything. We made love slowly, reverently, like it might be the last time. Like we were etching each other into skin. When we were tangled in the sheets afterward, breathless and raw, she looked at me with something I hadn't seen before.
Fear.
Lauren, she said, voice trembling. What are we doing? Falling, I said. Dangerously fast. What if it ends badly? Then it ends. But not without me loving you first. She blinked, lips parting slightly. You love me? Yes, I said. God, yes. She buried her face in my neck, and I felt her exhale against my skin like she'd been holding that breath for weeks. I love you too, she whispered. So much it terrifies me. We didn't sleep much that night. Morning came too soon, and we dressed in silence, not because of regret, but because we knew what waited outside the door. We exited at different times, kept our distance, but something had changed. The weight of what we felt was too big to hide behind clipped conversations and corporate smiles. And it showed. People noticed. The glances became longer. The whispers quieter, but more frequent. By the time we returned to the office, I could feel the tension crawling along my skin. It didn't take long. That Friday, my supervisor called me into his office. He was polite, measured, but his tone was firm. "There are rumors, Lauren, about you and Jenna Rivera." I kept my voice even. "Rumors are just that. We have a responsibility to the integrity of the workplace. And we've done nothing to compromise that integrity." "Be careful," he said. "That's all I'm saying." But the message was clear. Eyes were on us now. I told Jenna that night. We sat in my car, parked in a quiet corner of a neighborhood far from work. She stared out the window for a long time. "So what now?" "We stay careful. Stay quiet. Just a little longer." "Lauren, I know. I don't want to be your secret anymore." The words landed heavy. I reached for her hand. "You're not a secret. You're the most real thing I've ever had." "Then prove it," she whispered. "When the time comes, choose me." I looked at her and knew, deep in my bones, that I would. No matter the cost. Because at 36, I'd built a career, a name, a reputation. But none of it meant anything if I lost her. Not now. Not after finding the one thing I never thought I'd have. Something real. Something terrifying. Something that felt a lot like forever. The walls were closing in. That's what it felt like. Every day tighter. Every glance heavier. Every silence louder. I had thought we could keep this quiet. That if we were smart, careful, we could live in the stolen hours and hidden touches and no one would know. But the world notices when something is real. Especially when it burns. Jenna and I had grown bolder without realizing it. Not in our actions. Those were still contained behind closed doors, in parking garages, stairwells, and late-night texts that burned through the screen. But in our eyes, in our body language, in the way we looked at each other like we belonged. Love leaves marks, even when it hides. One Monday morning, I stepped off the elevator to find Jenna already in the office, laughing softly with a junior designer over coffee. She glanced up and smiled when she saw me, small, discreet, but not invisible. And that smile undid me in the worst way. I forced my own smile in return and walked past without slowing, my pulse already racing. Minutes later, I was in my office, door closed, trying to breathe. Then came the knock. She stepped inside quickly, closing it behind her. "Hey," she said, her voice low, careful. "Are you okay?" I looked up at her, took in the concern on her face, the way her arms were folded tightly across her chest like she was holding herself together.
"No," I said.
"Because I hate this." "I do too. We're lying every day, pretending you don't mean everything to me." She walked slowly across the room, stopping just in front of my desk. "So stop pretending. You know I can't." "No," she said, voice harder now. "You won't." The words hit me like ice. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" she asked, stepping back. I walk around pretending I don't see your eyes find me in every room. I pretend I don't feel your absence like a phantom limb when we're apart. I pretend I'm not in love with someone who still won't say it out loud. "I told you I love you." "In the dark," she said. "In secret." "But what about in daylight? What about when people are watching?" I stood up, heart pounding. "Do you think this is easy for me? I think you're scared." "Of course I'm scared," I snapped. "This could cost me everything. And what am I worth?" The question stopped me cold. Her eyes were shining now, but not with tears. With fire. With pain. With everything she'd been holding in. "If I asked you to walk away from this job to be with me," she whispered, "would you?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. "That's what I thought." She turned and walked to the door. "I didn't ask you to," I said quietly. She paused with her hand on the handle.
"No."
"But one day, someone else might. And she'll say yes." And then she left. The silence that followed was crushing. I sat down hard, my legs unsteady, my chest aching in places I didn't know existed. That night, I didn't go to her. I couldn't. My pride, my fear, my confusion, everything pressed in until I couldn't move. I lay awake in my apartment, her absence screaming in every corner. I checked my phone 100 times. No messages. No calls. I thought about texting her, but what would I say? Don't leave.
I'm sorry.
I'm scared. I love you. But love without action is just a word. And I had nothing but words. Days passed. Painfully slow. Jenna kept her distance. She was polite, professional, flawless. And cold. The warmth in her eyes, the private smiles, the little touches, they were gone. Erased. It was like she'd built her own walls overnight. I watched her and ached. I wanted to run to her, hold her, beg her to let me fix it. But I didn't. I just broke, quietly, where no one could see. Then came the day that shattered everything. I walked into a meeting and found her seated beside Marissa, the woman from Data. They were laughing. Close. Familiar. And I saw something in Marissa's eyes I hadn't seen before. Interest.
Heat.
She touched Jenna's arm when she made a joke. Jenna didn't pull away. I felt like the floor tilted. I sat through that meeting in silence, staring at the screen, hearing nothing. When it ended, I left without speaking. Back in my office, I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around my knees, eyes burning. I hadn't cried in years. Not once. But that day, I did. That day, I let everything fall apart. Hours later, long after most people had gone home, I was still there, still broken, when I heard the knock. I didn't answer.
She came in anyway.
Jenna stepped inside, her face unreadable. You weren't at your last meeting, she said softly. I wasn't feeling well. You look awful. Thanks. A pause. Then she walked to where I sat and slowly lowered herself to the floor beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. We just sat there in silence. And then I whispered, I saw you with Marissa. That wasn't anything, she said. It felt like something. It wasn't. Another beat. But it could be. If you push me away again. I turned my head to look at her. Her eyes were softer now.
Sadder.
I can't keep breaking like this, Lauren. Then don't. I'm trying. No, I said. Let me try now. I reached for her hand. She let me. Our fingers laced together like they'd never stopped. I've been a coward, I said. You're right. I've been hiding you. Hiding us. But not because I don't love you. I do. God, Jenna, I love you so much it hurts. Her breath caught. Then do something about it. I will. When? I looked at her. Soon. That's not good enough. Then come with me. She blinked. What?
Right now.
Let's get out of here. Away from the office. From the pressure. From everything. Where? Anywhere, I said. As long as it's with you. She stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. Are you serious? Dead serious. What about the job?
Screw the job.
Just for tonight. For a moment, she hesitated. And then she nodded. Okay. We stood, grabbed our coats, and walked out together for the first time. No lies. No pretending. Just two women in love, finally ready to stop running from it. And as we stepped into the night, hand in hand, I felt something shift inside me, like the world had finally caught up to the truth we'd been carrying for months. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. I wasn't going to lose her again. Not now. Not ever. We didn't run away. Not really. We drove for hours, no destination, just road and silence, and the kind of electricity that hummed in the space between us. Jenna had her feet on the dashboard, her head tilted back against the seat, eyes closed, a soft smile on her lips that made me want to pull over just to kiss her again, and again, until she forgot the world outside existed. We ended up at a quiet little inn near the coast. A place with creaky floors, no Wi-Fi, and a fireplace that smelled like memory. We didn't ask for separate rooms. The woman at the front desk didn't blink when we signed in with the same last name on a whim. Matthews. Rivera. We laughed about it later. In bed, limbs tangled, her hair splayed across my chest. "You really would have married me just for that moment, wouldn't you?" she whispered. "In a heartbeat," I said, brushing her cheek with the back of my fingers. "You still might have to." "Is that a proposal? A warning?" She grinned, then kissed me slowly, deeply, like she could taste the future in my mouth. We didn't leave the room much. We made love until our bodies ached, and our hearts felt too big to fit inside our chests. We talked about things we never had time to say, childhoods, dreams, regrets, the way love had failed us before. I told her about the first time I kissed a woman. She told me about the first time she fell in love with one. We were raw and real, and completely ours. For 2 nights, the world didn't exist. No meetings. No glances. No lies. Just her laughter echoing off wooden beams and the feel of her breath against my neck as she fell asleep wrapped around me like I was home. But the world doesn't stay quiet forever. On the 3rd morning, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. And again. Jenna looked up from where she was making coffee in her robe, eyebrows raised. "Popular today?" I picked it up, stared at the screen. 10 missed calls. 2 from my supervisor. 3 from HR. 1 from Marissa. And a message from my assistant. "Someone saw you and Jenna leave together Friday. They're talking. HR wants a meeting."
Today.
My stomach twisted. "Lauren." Jenna's voice was soft, but I could hear the edge of panic underneath it. I looked up at her, phone still in hand, heart racing. "They know." She froze. The silence between us wasn't peaceful this time. It was sharp,
Dense.
heavy. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know." But I did. We got dressed in silence. Packed quickly. The ride back was quiet, but not angry. Just bracing. Like standing on the edge of a storm and knowing the sky was about to open. Back at the office, everything felt different. Colder. Tighter. I could feel it in the way people looked at us. Too long. Too curious. Too knowing. Jenna disappeared into her workspace. I was called into HR within the hour. The conference room was already full when I arrived. My supervisor, 2 HR reps, and Marissa. She sat quietly in the corner, avoiding my gaze. "Lauren," one of the reps began, "we've had reports of an inappropriate relationship with an employee under your management." I sat down, spine straight, heart pounding. "I see. Do you deny it?" "Define inappropriate," I said calmly. One of them blinked. The other leaned forward. "You understand the seriousness of this." "I do." So a pause. "Are you in a romantic relationship with Jenna Rivera?" I exhaled. And then, for the first time, I didn't lie. "Yes." The silence that followed was immediate and thick. "Then we'll need to investigate further," my supervisor said, his tone tight. "Until then, you're on administrative leave." Understood. I stood. Didn't argue. Didn't plead. I walked out with my head held high. And then I went straight to her. Jenna was sitting at her desk, staring blankly at her monitor. I didn't say a word. Just touched her shoulder gently. She turned. One look at my face, and her eyes filled. "They know," she whispered. "I told them," I said. "No more hiding." "What did they say?" "I'm on leave." "Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "But I'm done pretending." "So am I." I took her hand right there in front of everyone. We walked out together. And for once, I didn't care who saw. That afternoon, we sat on my balcony, wrapped in blankets, sipping wine, trying to breathe through the fear. "What if they fire you?" she asked. "Then they do." "And your career?" "You're worth more." She blinked, tears slipping silently down her cheek. "Don't say that unless you mean it." "I've never meant anything more in my life." We sat in silence, the city sprawling out in front of us. The sun dipped lower. The sky turned orange. "I think I want to leave," she said after a while. The company?
Yeah.
Start over somewhere else. I've been thinking about it for a while. My throat tightened. Without me. She looked at me like I'd missed the point. With you, Lauren. If you'll come. I stared at her. At this woman who had walked into my life and changed everything. Who had peeled back layers I didn't even know I had. Who had made me feel seen, loved, whole. And I knew. Yes, I said. Wherever you go, I'll follow. She leaned into me then, pressing her forehead to mine. We're really doing this. Yeah, I whispered. We are. And even with everything uncertain, our jobs, our future, the world waiting to judge us, there was one thing I knew with terrifying, beautiful clarity. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. The world didn't fall apart. Not the way I feared. It didn't explode in scandal or collapse under the weight of whispers. It fractured quietly, piece by piece, subtle shifts, cool tones, long silences. That was how it began. The Monday after the HR meeting, I didn't return to the office. I was officially on administrative leave pending internal review, which was corporate for we don't know what to do with you yet. Jenna gave her resignation that same day. No announcement. No drama. Just a quiet email to the leadership team and a box packed by 11 a.m. I picked her up on the corner of Lexington and 54th, where she stood with her coat draped over her arm, her face unreadable. When she got into the car, she looked at me, exhaled, and said, "That felt like ripping off skin." "I know," I whispered. I reached over and held her hand for the entire drive home. That week was strange. We drifted in this space between endings and beginnings. The world outside kept spinning. Emails still arrived. LinkedIn updates piled up. Industry news scrolled across our feeds. But for us, everything had shifted. We slept in, made pancakes in sweatshirts, kissed in the kitchen until something burned. We applied for jobs, but only half-heartedly. We took long walks, said little, held each other's hands like lifelines. I should have felt panicked. My career had been the center of my universe for more than a decade. But with her beside me, it was just background noise. She was the real thing. She was the center now. And yet, not everything was peaceful. My phone rang almost daily, my supervisor wanting updates, HR asking for documentation, colleagues pretending to check in while digging for gossip. I ignored most of it. But then came the call I didn't expect. A partner at a rival firm. One I respected deeply. "We heard what happened," she said. "And I don't give a damn who you're sleeping with. I care about talent. And you're one of the best. You're offering me a job? An interview, at least. Discreet. Clean slate. No judgment." I didn't answer right away. "Can I bring someone with me?" There was a pause. "You mean her?" "Yes. If she's half as sharp as the buzz says she is, I'd be a fool to say no." I hung up with my heart pounding. Jenna was sitting on the couch, reading. She looked up when she saw my face. "Good news?" "Maybe," I said. "Opportunity. For both of us." "Where?" "Boston." "You'd leave New York?" "For you?"
Yes.
"For us?" "Absolutely." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears back. "Then let's go." We spent the next week preparing. Applications. Portfolios. Interviews. There's something electric about doing it together side by side as equals partners. For the first time, our love wasn't hidden. It was foundational. It was the reason we were building something new. And yet, the weight of what we'd left behind still followed us. The final HR letter came on a Thursday. Formal language. Final decision. Termination for failure to disclose a relationship that could present a conflict of interest. No severance. No thank you for your years of service. Just a full stop. I read it once, then again. Jenna stood beside me, silent. When I looked at her, she reached for the letter and tore it clean down the middle. "You're more than what they did to you." I didn't cry, but something in me unclenched. "I hope they miss me," I said. "They will," she said. "But I won't. Not for a second." That night, we drank champagne in the bathtub. Our new life was just beginning. 2 weeks later, we boarded the train to Boston.
2 suitcases.
2 laptops. 2 hearts more sure of each other than ever before. Our new apartment was small but bright. Jenna insisted on painting the bedroom walls green. "It's the color of possibility," she said, splashing paint onto her cheek and laughing when I tried to kiss it off. We started our new jobs on the same Monday. Different companies, same building. We met for lunch in the atrium and acted like any other couple. No secrets, no code words, no hiding. The first time I introduced her to a colleague as my partner, she squeezed my hand so tightly I thought she'd break it. I didn't mind. Every time I passed her in the lobby or saw her reflection in the glass of another floor, I felt it again, that same breathless certainty that had hit me the day she first walked into my office.
I had found the woman of my life.
And I had chosen her, again and again, over fear, over comfort, over everything I used to think mattered more. One night, weeks into our new lives, she turned to me in bed and said, "Would you have done it all differently if you knew how hard it would be?" I looked at her, brushed the hair from her forehead, and said, "No, because it brought me here."
To you.
She smiled and whispered, "Then let's never look back."
And we didn't.
Not really. Because when love is real, when it strips you bare, burns you down, rebuilds you, you don't need to look behind you. The future is enough. And ours had only just begun. It's strange, the way time softens things. The sharp edges of the past become smooth. The wounds don't vanish, but they stop aching in the same way. What stays, what refuses to dull, is the feeling, that bright, wild ache of knowing you chose something real, that you didn't run from it, that you let it change you. 2 years passed.
Just like that.
Boston became ours. A new apartment, slightly bigger than the last. A sun-filled kitchen with a crooked drawer we never bothered to fix. Sunday mornings with bare feet on cold tile and Jenna's humming filling the space before coffee brewed. We built a life not out of routine, but of intention. We kissed goodbye every morning, even when late. We held hands on walks, even when no one was watching. We fought, of course we did, about groceries, dishes, career moves. But we always circled back to the same thing. This is worth it. We are worth it. Jenna thrived at her new firm. She rose fast, her name now whispered with respect in rooms that once underestimated her. And I found something unexpected, a new kind of power in starting over. I no longer worked to prove anything. I worked because I wanted to build things that mattered. And people noticed. And still, through everything, we stayed side by side. Not just surviving, growing, becoming. One night, after dinner, we sat on the balcony of our apartment. It was early autumn. The air was crisp, and the wine was warm in our hands. Jenna curled beside me under a blanket, her head on my shoulder, our legs tangled like they always ended up. "Do you remember the first time I came into your office?" she asked. I smiled. "You leaned on the doorframe like you owned the place." I did not. "You absolutely did." She laughed softly. I was terrified. "You didn't show it." "You did," she said, grinning. "You barely looked at me." I couldn't. I was already falling. Her fingers slid into mine, slow and sure. I think I knew then. I didn't want to, but I did. I turned to look at her. She was watching me the way she always did when the world fell away, like I was the only thing she could see. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Anything." She shifted, reached into her sweater pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. She opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, golden light catching on the delicate band. "You've loved me through my chaos," she said softly. "Through distance and doubt, through risk and fear. You've held me in every version of myself. I never knew forever could feel this calm, this certain. But it does. With you. So, Lauren Matthews, will you marry me?" I stared at her, everything in me unraveling and coming together all at once. I didn't cry. Not yet. But something in my chest cracked wide open. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling. "God, yes." She slid the ring onto my finger, and it fit like it had always been meant to live there. We kissed, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that seals something sacred. And in that moment, everything else faded. The years we'd lost to fear.
The job.
The silence. The long nights wondering if love could survive being hidden. None of it mattered. Because this, us, had survived. Not just survived.
Grown.
Blossomed. Proven itself stronger than anything we thought could break it. The wedding came 6 months later. Small, intimate. A rooftop ceremony at sunset. Just our closest friends. No frills. No grand speeches. Just love. Jenna wore a deep ivory suit. I wore a silk dress that caught the wind just enough to feel like magic. We wrote our vows by hand. Mine ended with this. At 36, I found the woman of my life. Not at a bar. Not through fate. But at work, in a building full of rules and expectations. And I broke every one of them for you. I'd do it again 1,000 times. Because you are the risk that made everything worth it. You are my beginning. My middle. My always.
She cried. So did I.
We danced barefoot. We toasted with champagne and laughter. We kissed like we were still in that conference room, breathless and terrified and so alive. And after all the goodbyes, we lay together in a bed covered in white sheets and promises, and I looked at her and whispered, "You changed my life." "No," she said, brushing her thumb along my jaw. "We changed each other's." And that was true. We weren't the same women we had been that first day. We were better, braver, more open. We had turned every moment of risk into something beautiful. And in the quiet dark, I knew this was the ending I never thought I'd get. Not just a happy one. A real one. The kind that doesn't need noise or perfection. Just love. Just truth. Just us. Thank you so much for your support, whether it's by liking, commenting, sharing, or sending your super thanks. You make all the difference here on the channel. See you in the next video.